The moment his hands left the wheelchair, time fractured. The wind caught her hair. Her scream split the canyon, and the dog, once so quiet, erupted in a roar that echoed for miles. No one else saw it happen, no camera, no witness, just a man in a suit walking away from the cliff's edge, and a German shepherd who refused to stop barking into the void. What he didn't know was that the void barked back. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The early light of dawn filtered softly through the tall pines of Red Hawk Canyon, a rugged expanse of cliffs and winding trails nestled just outside Durango, Colorado. The summer sun was gentle this morning, casting gold across the high rock faces and dappling the dusty paths below with patches of warmth. A breeze whispered through the canyon, rustling the dry brush and carrying the distant song of meadowlarks into the clear air. It should have been a morning of peace, of quiet reflection, but beneath the calm surface, something far darker stirred. Richard Callahan stood at the edge of the trail in a tailored navy jacket, beige trousers pressed to perfection, and polished leather loafers far too refined for canyon dirt. At 52, his hair was silvered at the temples, his features chiseled and composed like a man born into legacy. His posture was impeccable, the product of decades as a renowned orthopedic surgeon, but behind his dark gray eyes hid an unsettling vacancy, an absence of warmth, of remorse, of anything that might have once been called paternal. Richard had always been a man of control, of image, but image could not save a career crumbling under malpractice whispers. Nor could it erase the bitterness left by his first wife's death, especially not with a disabled daughter as living proof of everything he could not fix. Sitting in a sleek, custom wheelchair was his 7-year-old daughter, Lily Mae Callahan, petite and pale. Lily's chestnut curls spilled over the pink knit cardigan she clutched tightly around herself. Her legs, motionless from the waist down since the accident that had taken her mother's life, were covered by a fleece blanket embroidered with daffodils. Her large hazel eyes, wide with a mix of wonder and unease, peered over the canyon rim. She had never been here before. She had never wanted to come. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the breeze. "Why are we here?" There was no answer. At his side trotted Ruger, a 6-year-old German shepherd with deep sable fur and amber eyes that shimmered with intelligence. His powerful frame moved silently, yet there was tension in his gait. Ruger had been trained as a therapy dog by Lily's mother, Sarah, an animal behaviorist with a quiet strength and a soul that poured love into every broken creature she met. After her death, Ruger had never been the same. He had taken up vigil over Lily, as if guarding the last part of Sarah that still remained. Ruger's ears flicked, his head turned. Something was wrong. Richard resumed pushing the wheelchair forward. The crunch of gravel under his designer shoes sounded too precise, too deliberate. He said nothing, only gazed at the drop ahead. Lily squirmed. "Daddy?" she asked again, this time sharper, frightened. Ruger stopped, his ears perked, his muscles coiled. He emitted a low, uncertain growl, a few feet away. The cliff opened like a mouth to the sky. Lily leaned back. Her small hands clutched the armrests. "Please, I don't want to go any closer." The wind picked up, sending a shiver through her. Her cardigan flapped slightly, Richard's hands, gripping the handles behind her, trembled once, then they pushed. The wheelchair jerked forward. No. Lily screamed, her voice slicing through the silence. The chair veered toward the edge, wheels skidding over loose gravel. Ruger lunged, barking furiously, but he was seconds too late. Lily's chair went over the brink and vanished. A thud, then silence. But fate had not yet abandoned the girl. 30 feet down, hidden beneath the overhang, a nest of twisted tree roots jutted from the cliff wall, catching the frame of the wheelchair. It teetered, then lodged between the gnarled wood and a rocky ledge. Lily's eyes fluttered open. Her breath came in shallow gasps, scraped and bruised, but alive. Above, Richard stood frozen. His chest heaved once. Then he straightened his coat, adjusted his collar, and walked away. He didn't look back. Ruger ran to the edge, his paws scraping the gravel as he skidded to a stop. His tail stiff, he barked, loud and desperate, then again and again. The sound echoed through the canyon like gunfire. He paced along the rim, sniffing the air, whining. His girl, his Lily, was down there, hurt, alone, back at the Callahan family ranch, nestled 5 miles east near the pine ridges of Hermosa. Hank Dobbins finished brushing down the horses in the main stable. Hank, a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s, wore a worn canvas jacket and a battered felt hat pulled low over a weathered face, a deep scar along his left temple, remnant of an old rodeo accident, only added to his weather-beaten look. He had served as ranch manager for the Callahan family since before Lily was born, and had adored Sarah like a daughter. Her death had hollowed out something in him, and he had never quite trusted Richard since. The air was calm, but Hank paused. He cocked his head. Ruger's bark, far off, shrill, not his usual playful alert. This was something else. Hank squinted toward the tree line, then he noticed it, something small, bright. Near the edge of the wooden fence, caught on a nail. Lily's pink satin hair ribbon, snagged and fluttering in the breeze. Hank's stomach turned. He picked it up, eyes narrowing. "What the hell?" he muttered. Ruger barked again, this time with fury. Hank's heartbeat quickened. Something was very, very wrong. The morning sun crept slowly over the ridge, its light pale and uncertain, as if it too sensed that something was wrong. At the Callahan Ranch, nestled against the edge of the Ponderosa Forest, the usual sounds of livestock stirring and horses nickering in their stalls played like a soft, familiar melody. But one note rang off-key. Ruger was silent. Hank Dobbins stepped out of the small foreman's cabin, a mug of black coffee steaming in his hand. His boots crunched across the gravel path as he walked toward the main barn. A chill lingered in the air despite the season, unusual for July in Colorado. He glanced toward the paddock where Ruger usually waited every morning, ears up, tail wagging. But the dog wasn't there. Hank paused. He headed toward the kennels behind the stable and found Ruger lying just outside, chin resting on his front paws, eyes fixed intently on the pine-covered hills that led toward Red Hawk Canyon. His food bowl, full since yesterday evening, remained untouched. Ruger? Hank knelt beside him. The German shepherd didn't move. Hank reached to scratch behind his ear, and Ruger gave only a faint, distracted flick of the tail. Ruger was 6 years old now, with a thick double coat of sable and black, a strong, muscular frame, and a gaze that always seemed just a little too knowing for a dog. He had once been the most responsive animal on the ranch, alert, protective, and gentle with Lily beyond words. Hank had watched Ruger grow from pup to guardian, never once showing aggression, only a fierce loyalty. But now, Ruger looked haunted. Something in Hank's gut twisted. He straightened up and looked around the property. Usually, Lily would have been wheeling her way down the gravel path by now, bright pink ribbon in her hair, waving at Ruger before breakfast. He hadn't seen her at all that morning. He took a long breath and turned toward the big house. Inside the Callahan residence. The air was stifling, despite the cool breeze outside. The house, built of timber and local stone, was immaculate, coldly. So, at the hearth, a woman stood in a silk robe, poking into the stone fireplace with a brass poker. Dana Callahan was in her early 40s, tall, reed-thin, with sharp cheekbones and auburn hair that she always kept in a tight bun. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the kind that drew lines around the eyes when she smiled, as if even warmth was something to be wielded, and Dana rarely smiled. She had arrived in Lily's life only a year after Sarah's death, bringing with her a quiet disdain masked by perfect manners, a former interior designer from Santa Fe. She had once built a name for herself among affluent clients, though stories of a fraud lawsuit and severed family ties back home had followed her like a bad scent. She had married Richard within 6 months of meeting him at a medical conference, stepping into the role of new Mrs. Callahan with seamless, sterile efficiency. When Hank entered the front hallway, Dana glanced over her shoulder. "Hank, you startled me." "Morning," Hank said slowly, just checking if Lily was feeling okay. "She hasn't been by the stables." Dana straightened, clutching a wad of half-burned papers between brass tongs. "Oh, I suppose you haven't heard what? She's been sent to a rehabilitation center. Out of state. Richard made arrangements last minute yesterday evening. Some top clinic in Arizona." Hank frowned. No goodbyes, no mention to me. I usually help prep her chair for travel. Everything happened quickly. Dana replied coolly. "Her condition has been worsening. You understand?" She tossed the burning papers deeper into the flames. Hank's eyes narrowed slightly. He nodded once, too curt to be casual, then stepped back toward the doorway. On a small side table near the door, he spotted a folded piece of paper poking from beneath a gardening catalog. It was mostly burned, but a few words still clung to the unscorched corner. "Trust fund. Expires upon child's 18th birthday." His fingers itched to reach for it, but Dana turned from the hearth just then. "Is there anything else?" "No," Hank said with a quiet grit in his voice. "That'll do." He stepped outside and shut the heavy oak door behind him. His heart pounded. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Back at his cabin. Hank sat at his kitchen table, the pink ribbon Lily always wore in her hair resting beside his coffee mug. Ruger had followed him silently and now stood by the window, tail low, eyes never leaving the distant ridgeline. Hank pulled out his old flip phone, the one he used for the kind of calls he didn't want logged anywhere else. He scrolled to a name he hadn't called in months. Sheriff Cal Brody. Cal was in his early 60s, lean and weather-beaten like Hank, but with a cleaner shave and a badge that came with decades of service in the San Juan County Sheriff's Department. He'd been a friend of Sarah Callahan back in their 4-H youth days. He'd been at Lily's christening. The man had morals, grit, and a deep dislike for secrecy. Hank waited through 3 rings, then came the answer. "Brody, it's Hank. Well, damn. Thought you finally retired off into the mountains. I need to talk. In person." A pause. This about the Callahans could be. Don't want to say much over the phone. Another pause. Longer. "All right, I'm listening. Meet me at the South Fork trailhead, noon." "Got it." Hank hung up. Ruger shifted beside him, a soft whimper in his throat. Hank knelt, eye to eye with the dog. "We're gonna find her. Boy, you know something. I can feel it." Ruger thumped his tail once. He'd never wagged that tail so softly. The air was thin on the ridge above Red Hawk Canyon. Sharp with the early tang of pine resin and distant smoke, storm clouds hovered far off on the western horizon, their edges bruised with blue and ash gray, threatening rain. The temperature, though only mid-morning, had already begun to dip again. A bird of prey screeched high above the canyon as Ruger stood at the edge, paws firm in the dry gravel, his head raised, barking, not aimlessly, but with rhythm, like a signal. His coat bristled with frustration, his voice rising from deep within his chest. He had been calling for hours, 30 feet below, clinging to a ledge tangled with roots and debris. Lily Mae Callahan sat hunched in her wheelchair, shivering despite the morning sun. Her cardigan, damp from the condensation of night, clung to her like paper. Dirt smudged her cheeks, and a dried streak of blood marred the space above her left eyebrow where she had struck the rock during the fall. Her breath came in uneven gasps. The fear from the night before had settled into a dull, numb ache, cold, relentless. Her tiny fingers gripped the arms of her chair, refusing to loosen, above her. She could still hear Ruger's voice. Distant, but steady. "I'm here," she croaked upward. But her throat, raw from crying and dehydration, betrayed her. A cough racked her chest. Her eyes fluttered shut again. Back on the ridge, Hank Dobbins parked his old ATV near a split rail fence overlooking the bluff, the small digital GPS unit on Ruger's collar, which Hank had insisted on years ago as a precaution, had led him here with chilling precision. Sheriff Cal Brody climbed down from his own patrol truck just behind him. Cal was wiry and tall, with leathery skin that hinted at years patrolling the mountains under unkind suns. His grizzled mustache twitched slightly as he surveyed the scene. "That's your boy," Cal asked, nodding toward the frantic shepherd. "Yeah, Ruger never acts like this unless Lily's involved." "Where's Richard?" Cal asked, eyes narrowing. "Back at the house. Said she was sent to Arizona, but I didn't see any transport, no luggage, no medical van, just her ribbon and this." Hank pulled from his vest pocket the half-charred scrap of paper he had salvaged earlier. Cal studied the words, his brow tightening. "Trust fund expires at 18. That's motive if I've ever seen one." Ruger barked louder, paws scraping closer to the edge. He crouched, eyes peering downward, tail stiff and twitching. Lily Hank shouted suddenly, stepping forward. The canyon returned only silence, but then faint, like the whimper of a fox in the underbrush. They heard it. A weak cry, a whisper of life. "Uncle Hank." The voice was small, fragile, almost carried away by the breeze. "Oh my God." Hank breathed. Cal grabbed his radio. "Dispatch. This is Sheriff Brody. Immediate search and rescue needed at Red Hawk Canyon. North Bluff, child in distress, possibly injured and stranded on cliff face." As the call went out, Ruger stood unmoving, staring down as if he could will Lily back up the cliff with nothing but his heart. At the Callahan estate, the large stone house sat unnervingly quiet until the rumble of the ATV engine faded from the distance. Dana Callahan stood at the upstairs window, her silk blouse wrinkled and clinging to her shoulders, a manicured hand twisting the hem in anxious spasms. Her eyes darted between the pine line and the driveway behind her. Richard Callahan paced. The composed mask he wore every day had begun to fracture, his hair now unkempt, shirt wrinkled, sleeves rolled haphazardly. This was never part of the plan. Dana hissed. She was supposed to be gone. Richard muttered. "It was clean. Nobody saw us. Nobody knew." "You didn't check," she barked, eyes wild. "You didn't make sure Richard stopped himself." His hands trembled. I heard her scream. I thought she was gone. From the open doorway to the hallway. Hank's voice interrupted. She's not. The couple froze. Dana spun first, her face pale. What are you doing here listening? Hank said, pulling a small voice recorder from the breast pocket of his ranch coat. And recording. Didn't think you two could help yourselves. Dana lunged for him, but Richard held her back. You're trespassing. No, I'm reporting a kidnapping and attempted murder. Hank replied, calm as ever. Sheriff's already on site with a team on the way. They heard her, you know. Lily's alive, so go ahead, run. Try it. Dana stumbled backward, breath shallow. Her carefully constructed mask collapsed into raw panic. She was a burden, she shouted, eyes glassy. Everything was in her name. She was going to take it all, just sitting there in that chair, reminding you of Sarah, and you couldn't even look at her. Richard didn't answer. His silence was a confession. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Search and rescue, fire teams, EMTs. The sound sent Dana crumpling into the leather chair behind her. Richard closed his eyes. Hank didn't say another word. He walked out and left the door wide open. The sky had darkened by late afternoon, casting an eerie indigo over Red Hawk Canyon. Thunder rolled across the peaks like ancient drums, and wind swept through the pines in heavy, moaning gusts. The summer storm had arrived with uncanny timing, its weight pressing down over the bluff where a small girl clung to life and a loyal dog refused to leave her side. Ruger stood at the cliff's edge, unmoving despite the sting of the wind against his face and the rain that had begun to spit like needles from the heavens. His thick sable coat, now slicked with water, rippled with every muscle twitch. His golden-brown eyes never left the ledge below where Lily Mae Callahan remained wedged between the gnarled roots and stone outcrop. He barked once, loud and sharp, as if to remind her and everyone that she was still there, still fighting, near the bluff. A rescue team had arrived, led by a tall, wiry man with a grizzled beard and the calloused hands of someone who'd spent his life on sheer rock faces. Pete Maddox, age 48, was a professional climber-turned-rescue specialist who lived in a weathered cabin up in Silverton. Pete's body bore the marks of survival. He walked with a slight limp from a fall years earlier, but his mind remained sharp and methodical. Beneath his soaked windbreaker was a harness packed with carabiners, rope coils, and first aid pouches. She's conscious, Pete said after Hank showed him where the voice had been heard. But we don't know how stable that chair is, or how secure the ledge is beneath her. One wrong step, and... He didn't finish the sentence. Sheriff Cal Brody nodded grimly beside him. We've got maybe an hour before this storm makes it impossible to descend. Can you do it? Pete looked over the edge. Yeah, I've done worse. But we'll need silence. And faith. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by the thunder's deafening answer. Lily stirred below. Her small body trembled with the cold, her cardigan now soaked through, hair matted to her pale forehead, but her eyes opened at the sound of Ruger's bark, and something deep within her stirred. A memory. Her mother's voice. Sarah. Sarah Callahan had been the kind of woman who moved through life with quiet certainty. She had been tall and willowy, with honey-colored hair that she rarely tied back, and a calm demeanor that made even the most anxious horses settle. After Lily's accident, it was Sarah who never gave up, who sang lullabies during hospital nights and whispered stories about bravery and healing. Sarah's death had broken something in Lily, but not completely, not where Ruger lived. When you hear Ruger barking. She had once told her daughter during a physical therapy session, It means you're never truly alone. Lily closed her eyes, letting Ruger's bark echo in her mind like a tether to something warm. Pete lowered himself over the cliff's edge, rope taut, guided by the rhythm of wind and instinct. Each foothold was carefully placed, every breath measured. Rain began to fall harder now, slicking the rock, turning the descent into a deadly calculation. Ruger paced the edge, barking in bursts, his body tensed with every movement Pete made. Sheriff Brody and Hank held the rope firm, boots planted in the muddy soil, jackets flapping violently. "Hang on, little one." Pete called, his voice barely audible in the rising wind. "I'm coming." Lily heard the voice but dared not move. The chair had shifted twice already. It creaked and tilted with the wind, held in place by nothing more than stubborn roots and fate. Pete finally reached her, eyes scanning the precarious setup. "Okay, sweetheart," he said gently, not letting the urgency show in his tone. "I'm going to strap you in. We'll get you out of this, but I need you to trust me." "I'm scared," Lily whispered. "I know, but Ruger's up there, and he hasn't left you, has he?" "No," she said. Barely a whisper, "Then neither will I." Pete's gloved hands moved fast. He attached a secondary harness to Lily, cinching it tight around her torso, one strap at a time. He unbuckled her from the chair. It groaned in protest. A gust of wind made them both shudder. The chair jolted. Pete acted instantly, lifting Lily into his arms. Seconds later, the chair tore loose and tumbled into the void, crashing against the cliff wall below before vanishing into the mist. Lily screamed and clutched his jacket. "It's okay," Pete whispered. "You're safe now." The rope pulled tight as Sheriff Brody and Hank began to haul them upward. Mud splashed their legs as the storm finally let loose in earnest. Ruger barked louder, tail whipping, when Pete and Lily crested the edge. The dog lunged forward, whining, nudging her hand the moment she was set down on the tarp. "You stayed," Lily said weakly, smiling through the rain. Ruger pressed his forehead gently against hers. The sheriff helped Pete up. "You did good?" "Maddox." Pete wiped water from his eyes. She did better. Back at the Callahan house, Dana and Richard were already in handcuffs. Deputy Granger, a stern woman with short blonde hair and a deep southern drawl, read their rights with professional coldness. Dana sobbed, no longer with guilt, but rage. Richard said nothing, his eyes hollow, watching as they were escorted into separate cruisers. The storm had not spared them. It had only revealed them in the sheriff's SUV. Hank handed over the voice recorder and the half-burnt documents. "Everything you need to lock them up for good." Brody nodded, pocketing the evidence. "You'll be her guardian." Then he asked. Hank looked toward the ambulance where Lily sat wrapped in warm blankets. Ruger curled at her feet like a sentry. "If she'll have me," he said quietly, as the storm eased into a cold drizzle. The sun broke through a crack in the clouds, casting pale gold across the trees. And for the first time in days, the canyon exhaled. A soft breeze swept over the green fields of southwestern Colorado, carrying with it the scent of early autumn hay and the faint rustle of golden aspens beginning to blush. 1 month had passed since the storm, but the Callahan Ranch, now renamed and reborn, felt like a different world altogether. Where once silence lingered like smoke, now laughter rippled across the pasture. And at the heart of it all was Lily Mae Callahan, sitting proudly in her new wheelchair beneath the morning sun. The chair, custom-made with lightweight titanium and adorned with daffodil decals, the same flower her mother had once embroidered on her blanket, rolled smoothly along the gravel paths. Her hands, though still small. Now moved the wheels with greater confidence. Each push was deliberate. Strengthened by daily sessions with a new physical therapist named Dr. Elaine Foster. Elaine was a warm, middle-aged woman with short curls the color of walnut and a sharp but kind gaze that missed nothing. She had worked for years at a rehabilitation center in Denver before returning to her hometown of Durango to start a private practice. Her build was athletic, her posture upright from years of working with children, and her laugh was infectious. She had been hesitant to take on Lily's case at first, skeptical after hearing what the girl had endured. But one meeting with Ruger changed everything. "I've never seen a bond like that," she had whispered to Hank the first week. "This dog doesn't just protect her, he anchors her." Ruger, now an official service dog of valor in the state of Colorado, wore a blue vest with silver stitching that gleamed in the sun. He followed Lily everywhere, beside her during therapy, curled at her feet during meals, sleeping outside her bedroom door. If Lily wheeled into a new room, Ruger checked the corners first. If she laughed, his tail thumped, and when she cried, rare now, he lay his head in her lap until the storm passed. The old Callahan property had changed. To Hank Dobbins, now officially Lily's legal guardian, as declared by the county court 2 weeks earlier, had poured himself into reshaping the estate. The stone mansion had been sealed off for legal processing, but the barns and lower land had become something new entirely. With the help of neighbors, friends, and some quiet donations from people who had followed Lily's story, Hank rebuilt the western pasture into an adaptive riding center. He named it Lily's Ridge. Stables were retrofitted with ramps and safety rails. An enclosed round pen allowed riders with disabilities to mount and dismount comfortably. A weatherproof therapy shed stood beside the corral, stocked with harnesses, sensory equipment, and a few sturdy ponies selected for temperament. But Ruger remained the star of the program. He was not a horse, but he was family, and no one questioned that. One clear morning, Hank stood leaning against the new paddock fence, watching as Lily worked with Dr. Foster to guide Ruger in gentle walking laps while she practiced balance in the saddle. She wore a soft riding helmet over her curls and her mother's old bandana around her neck. "You're doing great, kid," Hank called. Lily turned her head, grinning. "We're a team, right?" Ruger, the shepherd, gave a soft bark in reply, behind Hank. Sheriff Cal Brody approached in plain clothes. The man had aged more in the past month than in the previous year, the stress of the trial weighing heavy. But now, there was a peace to his face. "Thought I'd drop off this," he said, handing over an embossed certificate. It read, State of Colorado, Commendation of Honor, Ruger, Service Dog of Valor, for extraordinary bravery and loyalty. Hank's eyes misted despite himself. He deserves more than paper, but yeah, this'll mean something. Brody chuckled. "You both do." He hesitated, then added, "Judge Myers wanted you to know the sentencing was finalized this morning." Hank exhaled. "And Richard Callahan, 20 years without parole. Dana, 12 with chance of parole at 10, but neither will ever get close to Lily again." Hank nodded silently, watching as the girl turned Ruger with a soft cue, circling toward the barn. "She hasn't asked about them once, not since the hospital. She won't need to." Brody said, "You gave her something better." Later that afternoon, the sun dipped low over the rolling hills. A few local families had gathered at Lily's Ridge for a soft opening celebration, just neighbors and friends. Children played in the grass, and Ruger wandered between them, accepting pets with patient dignity. Lily sat by the fence with a cold lemonade. her feet dangling beside her chair, watching two young girls ride one of the therapy ponies under Dr. Foster's watch. "You think Mom would have liked this?" she asked quietly. Hank sat beside her in a folding chair, the lines around his eyes softening. "Sarah always dreamed of opening a place like this. She would have been proud, not just of the center of you." Lily smiled, brushing a hand over Ruger's thick neck. "He kept me alive. He keeps us all alive in his own way." Hank said. The sky turned a shade of peach and rose. Lanterns flickered to life along the fences. And for a moment, everything was still. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or fire. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a loyal dog, a second chance, or the quiet strength of a little girl who refuses to give up. In the darkest moments, God often sends his help through unexpected messengers like Ruger, who became more than a dog. He became a guardian, a bridge between heartbreak and healing. Lily's story reminds us that even when life feels broken, God is still working in the background, through people, through love, through courage. And when we feel most alone, a soft bark, a warm touch, or a quiet whisper in our hearts can be his way of saying, "You are not forgotten." If you believe that, faith, love, and second chances can still change the world. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment with the word Amen if you believe that God still sends his angels in unexpected forms. Subscribe to the channel to never miss a story that restores faith in humanity. And may God bless everyone who watches this, because sometimes all it takes is one story to remember we're never truly alone.